Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Nadex Morning Analysis, where we talk about hotspots in the markets for the day. It is August 27th, and I think we're going to have an interesting day today. My name is Todd Rich. I am with Nadex. With me from Keep Trading Simple is Brian Caprice. Before Brian and I jump into it, I need to quickly share this disclaimer that trading involves risk and may not be appropriate for everyone, that any trading decisions you make are solely your responsibility and at your own risk. And this is an educational session. Please do not construe anything I say or Brian says as a buy or sell recommendation. We are doing this for your education purposes. So, what do we have to talk about today? And there's obviously quite a bit to talk about. But first up, I think, actually, this is the chart of oil. We'll take a look at that in a second. I think what we're going to start off with today is a very 1 minute overview of what went down in natural gas yesterday. When we talk about it, we talk about where are those hotspots going to be, where is the opportunity, and there was a natural gas inventory report in the United States, and I'll even drop the link in. You can go back and look. Expectations were around 40 billion cubic feet in our inventories, in our stocks, came in way below that, came in at 29 billion cubic feet. Nat gas, not enough of it, and natural gas just exploded. The price of natural gas exploded.
Yes, I don't think that's the correct term there.
In fact, here so we do. I do want to go through that. I think it's a good lesson, so we'll spend a minute or so on that. I just dropped a link in if you want to look at the numbers from yesterday. Brian's going to run through the chart. Then we are going to talk about oil since we're talking energies. The reason we're going to talk about oil, it continues to push higher. It's now punching up towards $69 a barrel, and that's because there's instability in the Middle East, right? Whenever that happens, geopolitical shakeup in the Middle East, it impacts the price of oil. We're going to look at the oil charts. And then obviously the big news today, the symposium is going to kick off today. Fed Chairman Jay Powell is going to be speaking 10 a.m. Eastern. And with that, again, we mentioned yesterday, we might anticipate or expect to see some risk off in the equities. And we saw that yesterday. As the day went on, people started liquidating some of their equity holdings just so they weren't holding on to so much going into the Jackson Hole Symposium. And what are people waiting for? They're waiting to hear. Uh, are there going to be indications of a policy shift in the U.S., or are there going to be indications of a timing of a policy shift? More likely, that's not really what people are looking for when these quantitative easing, when these Federal Reserve bond purchases are going to start slowing down, that's which is what they're calling tapering. It's They're still going to continue to support the economy. It's just at what pace are they going to support the economy? Everyone's waiting. Powell's going to be speaking today at 10 a.m. Eastern. No one knows what he's going to say. So expect volatility in the equities coming out of whatever he has to say. Also, potential movement in currencies at some point because currencies have done nothing. There is no volatility and nothing's moving. Everyone's just sort of in pause mode. What's the U.S. going to do, and how might that impact exchange rates? So I think that's quite a bit. So Brian, let's start off quickly with just a quick recap of yesterday's nat gas, and let's get into oil and the equities.
Yeah, I mean, here is I'll go ahead and draw it just so you guys can see. Here's where we were yesterday in natural gas, and if you remember me mentioning that there's a lot of volatility in natural gas, particularly lately, this is the move that we've had. So right now, natural gas is the largest mover on the board at up 5.21%. The closest thing was the VIX yesterday at 4.88. So again, it's everything else is just very, very small, not a lot of movement. So natural gas is just insane. I guess AMC actually has a little bit more, down 8%, but we know kind of what happens with those. But I wanted to review, let's see if I can find it here. Oh, there we go. I wanted to review the natural gas setup from yesterday. And the reason why is because this is what we're looking at. If you guys remember at the very, very end, I told you guys again how to play news. And these opportunities have been great, especially with binaries. We talked about basically watching price, looking for an area of kind of stabilization. Now it's a 1 minute chart, so it's kind of harder to see. You can see that we had this kind of stabilization. And this is what I mean by stabilization. It didn't move for like 6-7 minutes. It just kind of stayed in that same area and kind of pushed down into a level of basing. It pulled back, right? It was not like at the high. It pulled back, it stabilized. And then again, here's our, and I have to shrink it, but there's our 1 to 3 risk to reward ratio as far as what we need. When this came out on the shorter duration binaries, there was actually 4 or 5 contracts to the top side of this one. As you can see, it went way, way, way higher instantaneously as soon as the news came out. And again, did I know there was going to be a big move? No, I didn't know. But again, everything in trading involves, basically risk management. We knew that it was pulling back. It did, it was the same setup that we saw in oil where it kind of pulled back, it stabilized and held in a level, and then it exploded. And again, this is about knowing your news releases. The last 3, 4, 5 months, actually, at this point now, we've seen large movements in natural gas on a regular basis. Does that mean that it's worth maybe a risk of taking something that's a little bit farther out of the money? Sure, absolutely. Did it justify it here? Absolutely. Right. And again, since that time, this is a 1 minute chart. But I mean, if I go back up to a 30, you can see it's pretty much gone straight up since that time. It just has gone. So, it's one of those things. You don't know which news event's going to be the big mover. But if you play statistics on your side and you stack the odds in your favor, that's how you kind of get ahead with everything in life. It's not just trading, but everything. The more odds in your favor, the better off you're going to be. And again, news trading is exactly the same no matter if we're looking at natural gas, oil, anything else out there. So, right now it is approaching a higher time frame level. I would expect a bit, and it's funny, there's absolutely no news out there on this. If you look at it, and you go out there and try to find something on natural gas, it's hard to find much on natural gas because it's just not one of the I don't know, the sexy headlines, I guess. You don't really hear much about it. Like, we have a lot of natural gas. Like, there is it doesn't matter what happens overseas. We are not running out of natural gas. It's the one resource that we have absolutely a ton of. Us and Russia are the 2 biggest producers of it. We got plenty. So there's no drama with it. So I guess that's why I kind of silently in the background goes, but this is just absolutely huge movement. As far as oil again is continuing to creep higher. Yesterday saw a lot of whipsaw back and forth. You see this big push up, big push back down again, and kind of closed right where the European session closed. And then in the overnight, we had a very, very active session. Now, this is a lot of movement in the overnight. Typically, we are looking for this. This can be tied back to one thing: the bombings in Afghanistan tomorrow. It is a geopolitical event. It's not like there's a big kind of exposure to oil. But anytime you hear about those things, particularly with American soldiers losing their lives, that's a big thing, particularly in,
you said bombings in Afghanistan tomorrow. So I know there was one yesterday.
There was 2 yesterday. I meant, there was 2 yesterday.
Well, we're going to have some tomorrow too, because the U.S. even said, listen, even as we're pulling out, there will be repercussions.
Well, they have to right now. If there's no, I mean, it's, again, that goes on the political side of things, which we are trying to keep, that aspect out of it. But I mean, news last week was very, very bad with approval ratings. Now there's 12 soldiers that have lost their lives. If there's nothing retaliation there, then you can write the ticket that there'll be a new president next time as well. It's just, it's one of those situations. But whenever there's war, oil tends to raise higher. It's one of those things that, it is definitely needed to kind of move the wheels of, whatever you want to call it, it's one of those things that is needed in war. So you're going to continue to see this. If it fizzles out and we don't hear anything else, again, oil will probably roll and flip back down again. We are getting out of the summer months back into the fall timeframe where oil typically gets cheaper. Tapering and things like that. I mean, it will affect it. But again, globally, oil is in a position where it needs to go higher. Remember, one thing that we're not talking about right now is the OPEC. And again, OPEC Plus is not going to say anything right now because oil prices are going back up again. The only time OPEC Plus makes a headline is when oil prices go down and they need to mess with it. If you remember in their vote, each month for like the next so many months, they are increasing the supply, but yet oil tends to go higher or is going higher right now. They're not going to say anything right now because, again, the more this goes up, the more money that they're making, the more control that they have. Remember, when they had no control, oil prices were much, much lower. Now that they have control, everything they do is about business, is about making money. They're going to continue to have this creeping higher. So I would say 69.50 is probably an area to look out for. It's an area where we saw sellers in the past. Is it a rock solid? It's not going past 70. Not really. I mean, once we get into that 69.50-ish range, all of a sudden that really big juicy target up there that has zeros behind it becomes in there. It's like, hey, if you're paying 69.50, why not just pay 70? Again, it's billions of dollars that they're going to make with oil prices that high,
Right.
particularly with political instability at this point.
So, all right. So that's, I mean, I think that's a good review of what's going on in energy and
Mhm.
what's going on there. Um, and we know currencies we mentioned, they're all flat right now. I mean, nothing's going on with currencies. Everyone's waiting to see
Yeah,
uh,
three,
policy
nine,
shift,
eight,
timing of policy.
three.
Yeah, nothing.
Yeah, the only
So
one moving is the dollar CAD, and again, that is because of
of
oil.
oil.
Right, but nothing is moving. Everybody, and it's funny. I actually pulled this up. If you look up Jackson Hole right now, and you look at like the top news releases, and again, I don't know if you guys can see this, or if I can make it big enough for you. It's really, really funny when you look at all the headlines. Europe heads lower as traders await Powell's speech. Stocks edge higher, ahead of Powell's speech. Treasury holds steady as investors wait for Powell's speech.
Yeah.
And then down
Wait,
here,
wait,
European markets
wait,
subdued ahead of Powell's speech.
wait.
Everybody is saying the same thing. It's
Yeah.
so, I mean, it doesn't matter what news station, they're all talking about it. Everybody is so focused on this right now. And as you mentioned, basically everybody in the Fed right now, that the regular suspects, I'm going to say, your Harkers, your Bostics. Yesterday we had Esther, we had the other one as well.
Yeah, right. The Hawks were out chirping,
Yeah.
and
Well, and they still
Powell's
are, and it's
gonna.
important. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're all talking about it. And again, if we talk about the actual news to justify it today, I mean, personal incomes are going up 1.1%. We're not spending as much because people are concerned. Inventories are higher. Price spending, again, it was not negative. It was exactly where they expected. It's still continuing to gain. So we're still seeing inflation. Also, again, remember, we're trying to keep politics out of this, but I forget where the news is right here. Oh yeah. Biden advisors weigh Powell as Fed chair. And again, Bernard and again, she is also started the chirp as well. She's actually the currency person. So, it's becoming, the Fed used to be completely separate, and now it's kind of like, oh, well, Biden's going to vote on it. And I'm telling you right now, it's setting up for a very interesting situation, because if we see runaway inflation and an economy that crashes, put it this way, we're speaking on a purely political standpoint here. They do not want a market crash. There's enough negative things right now for kind of a maintaining of power. If they throw a market crash on top of that, it's a recipe for a complete clean sweep back in the other direction. So leaving Powell in, who has been thus far saying, no, we're going to take it slow, everybody needs help, versus all of the data and everything else that we're seeing. And almost every one of them, and again, these are the most vocal Fed presidents. There are 12 people. But these are the ones that we hear headlines from every single time. They definitely have some sway. Everybody now is almost stacking against Powell. So it's kind of one of those things. If the Fed is turning on Powell, but the president says, no, he's doing a great job, let's leave him in there. At the end of the day, this is all going to come back later on. And he's either going to do a good job or a really, really bad job. And again, if everybody assumes he's going to remain dovish today. That's kind of what the overall assumption is, because that's what he's done every single time. The second he makes a hawkish move, the markets are going to go crazy. It's going to be like fireworks everywhere. Oh my God, he said something about,
And
the taper
I
has to
think
come
he's just
into.
trying to be he's trying not to be inflammatory. I think he's just trying to be measured. We did have our PCE numbers that came in today, the price index, 3.6%, right in line. So they're watching, and we do know that. I mean, yes, while we're seeing creeping inflation, there are concerns, and I think what people are going to be paying attention to is, with the Delta variant spread, how much is that going to be impacting? And we're seeing it. People are spending less right now. So people spending less, prices aren't going to be going up. So it's just like, we got to wait and see. And that's.
Well, and remember, experts are
I
saying
like
that
that he's measured. He's like trying to be calm about it. So
yeah, I
at
mean,
some
Delta is
point,
supposed to peak though in September. I mean, the
so
UK has already seen it. Other nations have already seen it. Israel's already seen it. As soon as it comes in here, that's the biggest concern is, we don't know about Delta, but we do know other countries that are ahead of us have already seen their peak and have had Delta being, declining.
actually,
So
Israel isn't peaking yet. They're getting worse. I just had my trip canceled there.
Yeah.
They won't let me in. So, but what I want to do, because we have a few minutes, we do know. I mean, listen. Based upon what Powell says, if he stays really dovish and the markets like it and the markets take off, we're near all-time highs. The markets go higher. The question is if he puts in anything that people are. It's kind of crazy. I mean, just because he says we're going to start a taper, some people are like, "Oh my God, I gotta sell," and they're gonna and could be some volatility. Let's take a look at where, because if it goes higher, it goes higher. But if there's a bunch of people
But the thing
plowing
is, the
in,
reason why, yeah, I would say I don't think it goes much higher at this point, and the reason why is because for him to basically say that we don't need to taper because Delta is so serious, that's the same reason why that the markets are going to be unable to go extremely high,
yeah,
right? So it's kind of one of those things. It's kind of like, oh no, we can't do this because of all these bad things. That's not necessarily a positive sign. It's great for the market because again, they're not going to be doing those type of tapers, but at the same time, the consumer is now also turned, and consumer sentiment is also starting to drop at a fast rate. We talk about
but I'm
economic
also
confidence dips as more say economy is worsening.
yeah.
Put
I
it
s- well,
put it
I
this
see
way.
the economy. I mean, even if we start tapering, that's actually an indication the economy is really healthy. And I know some people are just
Mhm.
waiting. They just really want to wait, and they want to hear him say something just so they could sell the market. Now, does that mean companies are going to perform worse? No, actually, his statement actually means the economy is getting better, and they just don't need our stimulus. So, but the question is, just we'll probably see a knee-jerk reaction sell-off just because there's so many people out there that thinks, oh my God, the economy is doing better. The government's not going to support it as rapidly and as vehemently, so we need to knock these prices down. I think it's a little cuckoo crazy logic, but if they were to do that, do we have some support levels where we might see? So if there is a washout where it might be an opportunity to step in.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I'm always about the numbers don't lie. People are getting paid more, they're spending a lot less, and confidence is down, and inventories are going higher. That's not a good sign for that. That shows you, right there, everything you need to know.
Well,
Americans love to
and
spend
that's
money.
what's going to prevent Powell from saying, "Well, then let's rip the stimulus out of here,"
Yeah, well,
because right,
like I
it's
said,
like
I don't,
this is what he's doing. He's like, it's everyone slow down here.
I
So
don't know what he's looking at. So, as I mentioned
yeah,
before, I don't, nothing that he's ever said to me has justified it. And again, if we want to talk about transitory again, we can talk about how transitory
I
doesn't
love
mean
it. Here's,
what he says it means, because every single month it keeps going higher and higher and
yeah,
higher. And
so
look at people paying $4.75 for gas and tell me it's transitory and
yeah,
see
no,
how happy they
well,
are.
and then there's external factors on that. But let's take a look at some support levels down below where we're if the
Yeah,
Dow.
I mean, I would say downside targets on a lot of these. You'd have 44.53 in the ES. The reason why is because, again, it was an area of interest. We saw some basing. It dropped below, peaked its head through, and then we had a nice burst out of it right at a 9 o'clock time frame. So it was a zone built. There's not a ton holding it. And again, this kind of
Wait,
turn
where
at
were down right around 44.
50,
50. Okay. Yeah, yeah,
53,
yeah, 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 yeah. I
just,
got you.
just
I
above
got you. I
that.
got you. I got you. By the way, I'm playing along here. So what I mean, as Brian's doing this, in fact, you guys can do this on your charts too. I'm going to, uh, and you can actually kind of see where he's thinking. Rectangle 4450. Let's just draw this in first. I'm just going to draw it, and we can slide it, and that would be right here, which was right where that last move made. So, you can mark this off. And if, this is an if this, then that. If we see a washout and it comes down here, you might see a pause right around this level in binary options. Could you try to play some of these shorter duration binary options when it gets down around there and play a bounce? It's something you can look at. Something to look at. So anyhow, sorry, Brian, I'm going to flip it back over to you.
No problem. NQ, kind of the same thing. We had that big racetrack area. We're kind of hovering above the 15,300 right now, and it's more or less stabilized itself sideways. Remember, the way to play NQ is going to be to drop to a 15-minute chart. Look at that one right at the open. See if it's driven into a zone. It looks like right now on the 30-minute it is. So that could definitely be set up. But again, I think it will be muted today off its normal opening, again, because Powell is speaking in less than an hour, 30 minutes after the open today.
Yeah, here we go.
People try to prepare for that.
Get ready.
But again, large move to the downside. If it starts to collapse and go through 15,266, there's really nothing there to stop it. We had the 15,200, which is going to be one level that may provide a little bit of a speed bump. But again, kind of the same thing. The last time we had any major buyers coming in are 15,120. YM, kind of the same thing, although it's a little bit farther down. We do have one tested level at 35,000. We know that 35,000 is a big level. Yesterday we talked about, we had that level there. We did have kind of a spike off of that at 11 o'clock, that 10:30 reversal time frame yesterday. So I'll just drop it down to 15. We did have this kind of piece up here, and there was a 1 to 3 reversal yesterday.
Yep.
We can watch out for that, and you can say that maybe this, again, this level right here, you can see it here coming across to here, 15,120. It's got a bit of ways to get down that far. So, I would say that there's maybe a reversal time frame in there, but like I said, is a little tiny 15-minute 15-minute zone going to hold with something at Palaces? No, not really.
Right.
So, I mean,
Yeah,
I think right.
that's the whole thing is what he says could knock the wheels off the bike one way or the other.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I mean, they should. If it doesn't do anything, then people are gonna be like, "Who is this guy?" Um,
well, you know what? I mean, I just don't. There's so many expectations. I don't think he wants the market to make a wild, volatile swing one way or the other. I think his goal is to keep a calm
well, remember
tone.
too, the
But
stock market is not the economy.
no, and it's not. It's
So he
just
doesn't.
that's how
Like I
people
said, I don't
react
think he
to it.
care. It's not a concern. What the market does is not necessarily a concern. He looks at the economy, and again, that's why his numbers and beliefs are a little bit different than ours.
Yeah,
Because again, his main focus is the economy and the numbers that he sees on like employment reports and
and
inflation.
not the stock
He has
market.
two mandates. His mandates are basically
2%.
inflation
Yep,
and what?
2%.
Yeah, it's supposed to be 2%, and we think that it's going to be well above that. And again, that's typically what the world's mandate is 2%. But the United States, we have two mandates. I'll let you guys do your homework, and then Russell, real quick, because again, it is getting to be 9:06.
Oh, I'm
Yeah,
having fun this morning. Well, today's an interesting day. There's just too much going on. We've got global instability.
yeah,
We've got expectations around policy. It's a lot, and everyone's
yeah.
just everyone's got their
Russell, I
eyes
would
on it.
say today. I mean, Russell definitely has. You could draw the trend line, right? You could definitely come down this direction and say, hey, listen, we're putting lower highs in. Yeah, you could absolutely say that. I think Russell's the most at risk today. Not that Russell-based companies are affected as much by any of the tapering that could potentially happen, but remember, Russell is more of the small-based companies. If people are doing less spending, even though they're making more money, and they're assuming that the taper's coming, okay, everything's going to start getting worse. We're not going to get the support that we had before. Typically, Russell is going to lead the group to the downside. Yesterday, it was kind of the leader to start off. I mean, you can see that it had a very, very big drop back to the downside. Right now, it's considered the weakest. It's still up, but just it's up. It's up, but not as much as everybody else. If it turns negative, the weakest of the group tends to go first. And I think, Russell is always the one that typically leads because again, it is the smaller companies are more, they can move around a lot faster and they're more sensitive to it. We have a zone at 2202, but I just don't feel that it's a level, but it's nothing that I would look at and be like, yeah, that's a great level. I love that level. Everybody should get long here. It's just not one of those things. It was just a minor pullback. I would say, I mean, really until we had some decent basing and popping, it is probably even lower down into this level right here. It's and that price tag is, way down to 2183. And if we drop that far today in one move, I mean, that's 38 points instantaneously down. What's the, it's going to be so negative at that point. What's to stop that from running all the way back down to this level of basing at 2116? So
there
here.
just be on your toes this morning. Binary options, limited risk, defined risk, defined reward, but your risk is limited. And if there's some volatility today and things start swinging around, that's a way for you to pick your levels but manage your risk. It's inherent into the trade. And we did go quite a bit today, but I think today it sort of warranted it. So with that, any questions for Nadex, please email us customerservice@nadex.com. Any questions for Brian or any support from Brian, you can catch him at support@keeptradingsimple.com. The brief recap, we did see a risk off in equities yesterday. Everyone's waiting. Currently, they're slightly in the green, but we're waiting to hear from Powell in 50 minutes when he gives his speech. So be alert, waiting to hear. And what everyone's waiting to hear from him is, are there going to be any indications on timing of a policy shift or anything that might be a little different than what he's been saying before? We've seen oil punching higher, instability in the Middle East. And by the way, Michigan consumer sentiment is also at 10 a.m. So while he's speaking, we're going to be getting some other numbers that could potentially be moving the market. So it's going to be an interesting day. Today, keep an eye on those equities. And Have a wonderful weekend. Brian and I will catch you again on Monday. Good luck in the markets, everyone.